What's up again, everybody? If you missed it last weekend, the National Championship season has kicked off across the world, and there are some incredibly interesting results, and this new meta is beginning to form after Prism, of course, rotated. So let's take a look at the results from week 1 and talk about what this meta looks like going into week 2 of the Nationals season. Now, of course, it's really important to understand where we're at right now with regards to this meta and why it's different from the last, and that of course is because of the rotation or the Living Legend status being reached by Prism. Prism moving out of the format does change things from a very fundamental perspective, and it really pays off if you like this guy. If you're a big fan of that guy, then Prism not being here anymore is good for you, because all of a sudden Oldhim is quite strong in the format and quite prevalent in the format. But we should also talk about this kind of fact that we are coming into this meta and into this Nationals season on the heels of a very important change to the Living Legend point system. And that comes from this change that they made right before this Living Legend National Championship season, started. And in this process, they've basically taken all of the points that you can score across these national championships and they've bumped them down by half. And what this ends up meaning for a hero like Oldhim is that even though Oldhim was dominant in this first week, as far as picking up wins for national championships, he's actually not scoring as many points and not pushing his way as quickly as he would in the previous system for Living Legend. And that, in my opinion, is a good thing. Even if you're not crazy about Oldhim, and personally, I'm not really crazy about Oldhim either, even if you're not there, what this system change means is that Oldhim and other heroes like them aren't going to immediately rotate out if they have this big surge of popularity and find mild success along the way. Because even though they are winning events and winning a good number of events, he's not just going to speedrun the leaderboard anymore and then move into Living Legend status himself. Same thing is true of Briar. Even though Briar did pick up a win, the same thing can be said. So let's go ahead and jump into the results that were posted on the website on fabtcg.com and talk through the top 8 results for the variety of tournaments that we saw. All right, so here's the page with all of the results from this past weekend. Full disclosure, I actually made this video on Sunday night before they posted this, and I'm now redoing this video completely because the information on this page is so well crafted and brought together that it's just better to show this than me parsing the information together from what I could find myself and from a bunch of sources. So let's talk through it. Of course, Australia, if you watched this was actually streamed. You can actually go back and watch this. Nick Butcher picked up the win on Oldhim, which was pretty cool, playing against Viserai, looking to pick up the win over Viserai, and did indeed pick it up. Now, this was a larger scale tournament. This was a 90-person mixed format tournament. It was half draft and half classic constructed, kind of like a Pro Tour is structured. And so that was really cool to see that it played out that way, because this was one of the only tournaments this past weekend. I think it might have been the only tournament that was mixed format like that. And when you look at the results, and we're going to talk about Oldhim a lot, or we're going to mention Oldhim a lot. Oldhim did pick up the win, but look at all of the other heroes below in the top 8. We had a Viserai represented, we had a Dash represented, Icelander, Icelander, Icelander represented. So 3 Icelanders. We had a Dromai, and we had a Kano, which to me was perhaps the most surprising and most exciting, is that Kano is still alive in this meta, even though Kano is going to have to face a good number of Guardians, I would say, in this meta. This is an incredibly interesting looking top 8. And it's one that I think is partially crafted from the fact that, these players had to do Uprising Draft alongside of their classic constructed play. And so that really does do some interesting things with regards to who makes the cut, because you do have to be a much more well-rounded player to be able to make the cut in both classic constructed play and also in draft play. But this, even though again, Oldhim is quite good in this format, look at the amount of heroes alongside. I mean, if we're counting Oldhim, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heroes that are different in the top 8, and that is really exciting. And several of these are control style heroes, or can be control style heroes. Dash, depending on how the dash list is played and built, can be control, or it can be more like just a mid-range deck where it's control, or it's you know, like all aggro. It's a hybrid. It really plays in a lot of different ways, which is really cool. We have Viserai, which is traditionally just an aggro slash combo deck, but really more of an aggro deck based on the way he plays now. And then we have Kano, which is a pure combo deck. And the fact that all of these archetypes, and I do archetypes in quotes loosely, all of these archetypes are represented in the top 8 is really encouraging to the meta. That is, to me, it's very encouraging. I'll put it that way. France was also a larger event. It was a 52-person classic constructed event. That, again, was picked up by Oldhim, and in fact, it was an Oldhim mirror in the top, which is quite interesting. But you look down the row and you see more heroes. You see another Guardian, you see Bravo represented. Iyslander is still hanging around because Iyslander is good in this meta now, because Iyslander lost the hard matchup of playing into Prism. Same thing as Oldhim and same thing as Bravo, lost that hard matchup, and now is starting to find a foothold, especially if you're playing against Guardians, where I think the Bravo matchup is a little tough because you do have to play around Pummel so much more. But into Oldhim, you have possibly the ability to set up like the Frost Hex plan a little bit more easily. But even then, we still see Briar represented in top 8, Viserai represented in top 8, and another Briar. And so you're looking at this and you're like, yes, it was a top 2 of mirror match, right? And yes, there was a third Oldhim as well. Oldhim very well represented in France here. But outside of that, we also have 2, 3, 4, 5 heroes in the top 8. 5 different heroes in the top 8. Austria was a bit of a smaller event. It was a 22-person classic constructed event. This one was picked up by Briar, and no, this is not nearly enough points now because of the change to really move that needle for Briar to get closer and closer to the Living Legend status. It was almost a guarantee in the old system that Briar would pick up 3 wins and move on. Now, not so much, and I think that's really cool because it means that possibly Briar has the capacity in a new meta to look at the deck differently and to play things out differently. Maybe all of a sudden you try to make some sort of a combo Briar that can now go over the top of an Oldhim. That might be really interesting. But looking at the breakdown here, we do have a Briar picking up the win against a Dash player. Oldhim, so 3 Oldhims, 3 different Briars as well, and a Dromai as well. And the Dromai thing is really interesting to me because Dromai having on paper, a theoretical slight edge in the Oldhim and possibly Guardian just in general matchup is really, really interesting. This is a hero that I would definitely keep my eye on because she can almost take the role and supplant the role of Prism in most matchups, but just not quite to the same degree. And that's why I'm very curious to see how Dromai plays out. Speaking of Dromai, in the Hungary National Championship, which was a 21-person classic constructed event, Briar picks up another win, but against a Dromai. And then look at this, we have an interesting breakdown of Lexi, another Briar, a Dorinthia showing up, Phi, another Lexi, and Viserai. Now, again, keep this in mind, this is a small event, okay? This is a 21-person event, and you can't fault events for being small. You just can't do that. But you do have to understand that with a small event comes the ability for more fringe heroes like Lexi's. And I wouldn't say Phi is a fringe hero, but I do think like Lexi is starting to be that fringe hero. You have the capability of these types of heroes of just cutting their way in based on player skill over the player skill of others. And that's what makes them interesting. Same thing with Dorinthia. Dorinthia actually does not have a terrible time in this meta, I would say, because you can play into something like a Dromai. You can play in something like, it's not a great matchup, but you could actually consider like super like tall Oldhim stuff, like into Oldhim, like playing Dorinthia and just trying to go super tall into some of their blocks. That could be very interesting. She has an actually decent chance in this meta, I think more so than any of the previous metas that we've been in the recent like year or so. Lithuania had a 20-person classic constructed event with Oldhim, just like lots of Oldhims, but then we see some familiar names, Phi, Icelander, dash, Lexi coming in again, dash, and Viserai. And I know people are going to say Lexi shouldn't be considered a fringe hero. And you're probably right. She probably, in my mind, she is sort of considered that fringe hero, but she shouldn't be, perhaps. I don't know. It just depends on player skill for me when it comes to Lexi. Again, smaller event, you see a few more of like these fringe heroes like a Lexi maybe pop up, a 5 pop up. But again, Oldhim is very good. Oldhim good. Oldhim quite good. Malaysia had what is perhaps the most incredible finish of all time in Flesh and Blood. And I am not just going to leave it at that and talk through the results. I am literally going to show you the game. Okay, so if you have not seen this, this is the ending. The matchup was this. It was Bravo Showstopper versus Reinar. And apparently both players have stuck with their heroes since they joined the game, since they got in the game. It's 3-4, okay? So this is like classic WTR matchup. Stamp Authority is played by the Bravo player to draw into like 5 cards. So this is a 5-card hand, and the Reinar player named Nitya, I probably pronounced that horribly, I apologize, is going to Intimidate. She's going to Intimidate one of these cards from the hand. That leaves with a 4-card hand, which is huge, going into whatever attack is thrown from her. Now she's going to slam down and literally just pitch for the Romping Club, presenting some Romping Club damage. It's nothing crazy, but it can buy a few cards. And when you're both at low life totals, 3 to 4 respectively, you're literally just presenting that good old casual lethal. It's lethal that says, hey, if you do nothing, I win the game. And so in the act of presenting said lethal, your opponent has to sit there and consider what you're going to block with. But you do know, from the Bravo player's perspective, you have an arsenal, you have a 4-card hand currently, and you're going to draw back into the card that was banished off of the Intimidate trigger. So you're in a pretty good spot here. If you have something like a cheap attack, or you just want to double pitch into a Nothos and then threaten something like an Arsenal Pummel, or maybe a Pummel from hand or anything like that, you can just fully commit to blocking 2 cards, 3 cards, saving 2 cards from hand, pitching those cards, playing an Othos out there, threatening 6 damage, and then coming in with a Pummel after the fact. Something like that, right? So this is a fairly easy block from the Bravo player. The things you have to worry about are, something along the lines of maybe an Arsenal Pummel. But to this point, I don't believe, and I'm trying to remember how this game kind of unfolded on the few turns before, I don't believe that Pummel has been represented at any point. So if you have a read on your opponent that they don't have Pummel in Arsenal, you might just be able to like 2-card block this from the Bravo player's perspective. And of course, this is for the National Championship of Malaysia. So whoever wins this is the national champion. And that is pretty cool. So considering this moment, you do want to consider how you're going to block, what you're going to keep. And he's going to 2-card block here. And then there is a Pummel represented, but it looks like that Pummel does not actually push any damage over the top. Based on the numbers, doesn't look like it's going to push anything. So passing the turnover, losing the Stamp Authority, and then drawing back into the cards that were intimidated out, and then drawing 4 cards. We have Seismic Surge Creation, a Seismic Surge Pop, and then just the good old-fashioned pitch, a Nothos, 4-6 here. And this is where the fireworks begin, because we have a single card block, blocking for, I believe, 3 on the 6. Moving to reactions, we have a defense reaction played, and it's a Reckless Swing. So their Reckless Swing is going to pick one of these cards, and it hits a Beast Within, which banishes and misses, and then banishes and misses, and then banishes and hits, leaving Nitya at 1 life. If she misses one more time, she dies. And then she comes in with the Arsenal Reckless Swing number 2 for the win. She double Reckless Swinged to become the Brute Queen champion of Malaysia. So I'm going to pause, and I'm just going to explain, if you didn't follow all that, what insanity just occurred. So Reckless Swing is a defense reaction that says when you choose to block with it, you discard a card from your hand. And if you do, and it's a 6 power attack, it deals 2 damage to the opponent. So Reckless Swing, the defense reaction, deals 2 damage to the person who's sitting on 3. Okay, so the first Reckless Swing deals 2. But unfortunately, you discarded a Beast Within from your hand. And Beast Within says when you discard this, or when this leaves play, not from the combat chain at any point, it's going to banish the top card of your deck and lose 1 life for you. So Nithya was at 4, so she banishes the top card of the deck, loses 1 life. If the card that's banished is a 6-power attack, put it into your hand. If it's not, you repeat the process, meaning you go again and banish and lose a life. So she banishes a non-attack action card, loses a life, drops to 3. Then she banishes a non-attack action card, loses a life, drops to 2. At this point, if the next card's a non-attack action card, she's dead. But it's not. It is I think it was like a swing big or something like that, meaning that she banishes that card, loses 1 life, goes to 1, puts that card into her hand, giving her, you know, enough cards to obviously play out this next thing, which was another reckless swing. And then because she had 2 cards in her hand that were both like meeting the requirement of being a 6-power attack, didn't matter what was picked or what card came out randomly from the discard, the second reckless swing deals 2 damage and kills the Bravo on their own turn, swinging a Nothos after they represented their own pummel for lethal. It's the best ending to a Flesh and Blood game I think I've ever seen. It's so good. Oh man. So anyway, so that happened, and Malaysia has a Brute Queen, which is incredible and so cool, picking up the win with Rhinar. Reckless Rampage against a Bravo Showstopper. But look at the top 8. Again, Dromai, Dorinthia, Phi, Icelander, Briar. Huge spread of heroes. Huge spread of heroes. That is insane. Now, this is a 48-player event, so this was right on the cusp of actually meeting that requirement of being a higher tier for amount of points that you know is won. But it wouldn't even matter because Rhinar is not necessarily close to winning or getting Living Legended out. Still incredible. And then of course in Norway we had a 23-person event that was picked up by Dromai, believe it or not. Dromai picked it up over Viserai, and Dorinthia was present, Oldham was present, Phi, Bravo, and Dorinthia again. This meta is looking very open. Even though Oldham is incredibly good right now, and I feel like probably just the most dominant hero in the meta, it may not be that far off. It may not be that much further than all the other decks, and that's what's really cool, because it is a very wide open meta. Slovenia was a very small event. It was literally a 9-person event, just very small, so these results are a little tough to look at as far as like how I guess what's the best way to say it, how vetted it is. But Oldham picks up the win, and honestly, it falls into place. You see heroes that we've seen all over the place: Dorinthia, Viserai, Briar. It's very interesting. And then finally, Vietnam was actually a 27-person Blitz event, and I just want to point this out: Oldham's actually really good in Blitz still, even with the loss of the Crown of Seeds. Oldham's still really good in Blitz. So what does this all spell out? Well, the way I see this meta is far more varied than I would have expected. I would have expected a little bit more compression as far as what like Oldham and Bravo do to a lot of the heroes, because Pummel's a really good card, and like Fused Oaken Olds exist still in this game. And yet we have perhaps enough tools to really represent all of these archetypes within a tournament, and all could be successful. Now, is Oldham just the best hero? That is very possible that he's still just the best hero, and that at the end of the day, Oldham just runs the show. But all of these results tend to lead us to think, or should perhaps lead us to think, that if you have very high skill levels on any of these types of heroes, you actually have a shot of taking down a major tournament like a national championship. So if you enjoyed this recap, if you like where the meta's at now, leave a comment down below. Tell me what you think the best hero is. Tell me what you think of the meta currently, if you like it, if you like how open it is, or if you don't think it's open, tell me that too. If you enjoyed this or got something out of this video, make the number go slightly higher. Just by pressing a red button, you have this power, it's pretty cool, of making that number climb slightly higher. As always, thanks for watching.